In this video, we're going to talk about automated modeling, specifically modifying the form body that gets created with your designs. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in this video, we're going to take another look at automated modeling. The first video was extremely popular and is still getting tons of views, so I figured that people are really interested in this, and I figure we should dive a little bit deeper. So what we have here, and in the description of the video, you can download this data set, which is essentially just a single top spherical body that is going into 10 different runners. Now, what is this used for? I really don't know. I mean, it could be intake for a V10, or it could be some sort of fixture. Really, that doesn't matter. What matters is how we can modify this. And if you've had experience with generative design, then you're familiar with this form body and boundary fill to create a solid. But if this is your first time experiencing this, there are a couple things that you probably need to know in order to modify these designs. First things first, I will note that the generate preview feature is in the timeline, so you can double click on that or edit this, and you can go in and select a different version. Now there are 6 alternatives. There are 3 that have a smooth transition to the selected geometry. In this case, that is not going to be what we're looking for. And then alternative 4, 5, and 6 are going to have straight versions, straight features. So you can see that 4, 5, and 6 give you a different variation on this design, and it kind of depends on the tangency direction that works for you. You can see that alternative 5 has good tangency direction with this top piece, but with the individual runners, it doesn't really have that same sort of transition that we're looking for. You can see 6 has the transition with the runners, that looks good, but at the top it's coming out sort of sideways. So if you run into a situation like this and there's an alternative that you like, but you can't quite make the design work, let's talk about how we can modify this and get a result that works. So first things first, let's understand what the results are with the form body, the boundary fill, and this combine feature. Now the easiest thing to do is to roll back the timeline before each of these and just see what happens. Now the combine feature is actually a subtract feature. Now when it ends up happening is one of the bodies that we selected that is going to be used as a transition shape actually gets removed. So anytime that the form body overlaps this, you can see that it's actually cutting away some of the material. Now, generally, I don't like this. And the reason I don't like this is because it leaves these tiny little edges, and these are problematic in a design. This is not something you really want to build because it's just not good practices when you're talking about creating a design. Whether you're 3D printing it or you're doing some sort of lost wax casting with this, it really is not going to be very beneficial to you make the tooling for it. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to fix that. The second thing I want to talk about is this boundary fill. And what ends up happening with Fusion 360 generative design, as well as this new automated modeling, is that the boundary fill combines the original solid bodies that we create, and it combines the form surface feature. So with a design like this, what I would likely do is suppress the combine. So I'm going to right click and I just want to suppress this feature. I'm going to suppress the boundary fill. So again, right click and suppress it. And then I want to focus my attention just on the surface body that gets created. Now you'll notice that right now it's hidden. It's there, but we have to actually hide it and show it again. And sometimes you have to go back into the form body to see it. I don't know why that is. I think because this is a preview tool, maybe it's a glitch. But the next thing that we want to look at is the fact that when generative design and automated modeling create these models, what they do is they freeze the edges. So the light blue edges that we see here, those are frozen in place. And the main thing that it's looking to do is it's freezing them so that way it can ensure that there's a small amount of overlap when it creates the solid body. Now in general, that's fine, but in reality, that's not going to give us what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to undo all of its hard work. So we're going to go to modify, and we're going to go down to unfreeze. That's in this freeze section. We're going to select unfreeze. And the selection filter, note that we can do faces, edges, or an entire body. And if I select the entire body and I select this T-spline body and say OK, it should unfreeze all of those for me. Now if I select these edges and I go to move them, they should be able to just move on their own. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that, hit cancel, and put it back. The next thing that I want to do is I want to notice that it has some green edges or lines on here, and it made use of symmetry. It knew that the design was symmetric. It automatically figured that out for us, and that's actually really helpful. Symmetry is something that wasn't in generative design initially, and it took quite a while for them to be able to put symmetry in there. And it's an option you have to check if you're using generative design. In automated modeling, it's automatic if your design is symmetric. So that helps us a little bit, but it also is problematic because now what we have to do is we have to manually adjust everything. So when we're doing this, we can think about the fact that we have symmetry. So if I take one of these vertices and move it around, you can see that it is moving around on all corners. So that is something that we need to be very mindful of. If we want to clear the symmetry, we certainly can by going up to symmetry and clearing it. But for this example, I'm going to leave it on. Now that we've taken a look at what we have a form, surface, body. It has symmetry and we've cleared all of those frozen edges. The next step for me is to manually create the geometry that I actually wanted. So this automated modeling got me extremely close really quickly, which is great. But now I want to clean things up a little bit. For me to clean things up, the first thing I'm going to do is double click this top edge. I'm going to go to Modify, Edit Form. And I'm going to hold down the Alt key on the PC and I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to let it go. You'll notice that it's not flat. So I'm going to take this scale. I'm going to scale it all the way down to 0. And then I'm going to hit Tab. The reason I'm going to hit Tab is because if I hit Enter, it's going to end the Edit Form dialog. Then I'm going to take this again, hold down Alt, pull this up and extrude it one more time. And now you can see that we've transitioned to that shape and it's going up from the form body. It's not perfect, it's not ideal, but it is a bit better than what we got from the original boundary fill. We could continue to work on the shape if we wanted to. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it in this video because really that's not the intent. You're probably not going to do anything with this, but it might be helpful if you are working on your own designs. The next thing that I want to do is I want to take all of these bottom edges. I'm going to box select them all. I'm going to go to Modify and just pull them up a little bit. The main reason I want to pull them up is because I want to use Associative Match. So under Modify, we're going to go down to the Match tool. We're going to match the T-spline edge. We'll do these one at a time. So I'll double click there. And then we want to match the edge on a design. Now, when we do this, we can have it connected. We can drive it with tangency or curvature continuity. If it's going the wrong direction, just simply hit alternate tangent and it'll take the vertical edge, the side of that cylinder. You'll notice that when we do this, that automatically deviation is turned on. It's going to display the max deviation between the thing you selected and your form body. And if we want to, we can turn on tolerance, and this will allow us to enter a tolerance value, and this will ensure that it adds T-points to the design. Now, I've talked about this in a previous video. If you're going to be inserting edges and continually modifying the design, I highly suggest that you do not turn on tolerance at this point. When you turn on tolerance and it inserts those additional T-points, it makes it complicated to add additional edges. So for example, if I say OK, and I take a look at this edge that's been added, if there are any T-points in the middle of any of these, if I try to insert an edge, for example, we go to Modify, Insert Edge, 50% will no longer be in the middle of two edges. It'll be wherever those T-points get added. This design actually has quite a bit of resolution, so it's fine, but in some cases you might find that it's going to mess up your design. Another thing that I like to do is I want to clean up some of these shapes. We can use tools like Modify and Cylindrify. And if we select some of these faces as we go around, what's going to happen is Fusion 360 is going to try to turn these into a cylinder. Now this really only works as we go around and we start to select these shapes and we get all the way around. We could, of course, use some box selection and some paint selection, but once we get all the way around, it's going to give us a little bit better result. There is another tool that we can use. If we're in Modify and Edit Form and you go to your selection options, there is this feature selection which uses Alt and H. So if I select one of these and I hold down Alt and H, what's going to happen is it's going to allow us to select specific features. So Alt and H, you can see it grab that entire stem. So now if we do Cylindrify on that, it's going to try to turn that into more of a cylinder. Now again, for this design, it probably isn't the best option, but for some designs that can actually work really well. I'm going to cancel that, and I want to talk about one or two more things. When these designs get created, a lot of edges get added, and we can double click on those and simply hit delete. And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll go through and just get down to the bare minimum number that I want to make the smoothest transition possible. If you don't need extra edges in your design, then just get rid of them. It's not going to help any because you can see that we end up getting these little waves and these wiggles in the design, and it just becomes problematic. So with something like this, I'd likely get rid of this edge, get rid of this edge, and this one I'm going to keep simply because there's a star point here because we're changing directions. So I would likely want to make sure that I keep that one. And then we can go to modify and associative match. So this is my T-spline edge, this is my match edge. Make sure that the tangency is the correct direction. So you might need to flip that. And I'm going to leave tolerance on because I did it for the other one, and we'll say okay. And last, because we have symmetry, I really just need to do it here. So repeat match, double click this, match edge will be here. And we want to make sure that we do use the tangency option like we did for all of them. Make sure that we are flipping it the correct direction. Notice that it's giving me an error, and part of the reason is because of the symmetry. Now, it's going to try to break that symmetry, and what we end up having to do is probably clear the symmetry and re-add it. We can also try to go to utilities and repair body. We'll select the body and see if it can automatically repair that. In a case like this, it can't. So likely what I would do is clear symmetry, and you'll see that it looks fine. So then I'm just going to re-add symmetry because I already know that this is symmetric. I can just select one face on either side. We're going to right click and repeat that because I want to mirror it the other direction as well. So I'll come over here. And now we've re-added that symmetry. That does happen from time to time depending on your selections and your geometry. This one seems to look okay. And once again, we can remove some of these edges if we decide that we don't need quite the resolution for the shape transitions, and it's going to give you a cleaner look. There's plenty more that I could do to this, but I don't want to get too bogged down with spending a bunch of time on this shape just because it's in front of me. I have a tendency to do that. But at this point, we have to think about two main things. Do we want to continue to use boundary fill and turn this into a solid? Or do we want to use something like thicken? And if you want to use thicken, there are two different ways that you can do it, and there are two reasons why. Under modify, we have a thicken. And when we select thicken in here and we go ahead and we pull this out, this gives us a couple of options. 10 millimeters is a bit too much, so I'll do 2. But this gives us a couple of options. We can have sharp, soft, or no edges. No edges will create a copy of the body, but just extend it out whatever our distance is. Soft will allow it to have a smooth wraparound, and sharp will add a crease at each of the corners. We can also go out in the normal direction or an axis. For a part like this, the axis option doesn't work, so it would have to be normal. I'm going to say okay, but I'm going to actually undo this afterwards because this complicates the process of modifying our design. And the reason for that is because now we have form control on the inside and the outside edge. So if we wanted to, say, change the thickness in a certain area, for example, this edge, I can modify, I could go to my top view and maybe scale this out a little bit. And then what we have now is we've got a thicker section on the outside of this design and a thinner section on the inside. So if we do a section analysis and we look through this, you can see what we actually did was we created a thicker section on the outside and the thinner section on the inside. Because of this, I'm going to do Control Z to undo that, and I'm going to undo the thicken. I'm going to finish the form, which turns this back into a surface, and then I can go to Create and Thicken here. Now, the reason that this is beneficial is because this doesn't mess with the form body at all. I can go back and I can change the shape as much as I want, and then I can come back and it'll automatically convert it back to a surface and thicken it. So if I wanted to add 2 millimeters to the inside or the outside of this design, in this case, it would be -2 because I want to go inward. What this allows me to do is keep the original form body so I can come back and edit it. I'm going to use Control and 4 on the keyboard to get rid of the edges. And you can see that we made a pretty unique shape. Obviously, the shape itself was already done, but hopefully this gives you a little bit of information on how you can make modifications to the form designs that are created with automated modeling. If you have something that you want to see, a specific part or design or some sort of modification, please let me know. If you have an idea that you want to see me try to model with this or any other modeling approach, please let me know that as well. As always, you can email me support@caducator.com or leave a comment in the video. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.